Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students in grade 9 and prep 3 and our sons abroad, today inshallah we will continue our final revision for the story A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. We will continue the second part that is concentrating on the most important questions, the questions that are mostly repeated in the final exams. Let's start with the first question. Question number 32. For his sake and the sake of his daughter, I beg your help. Comment. Who said that? Of course, these words were said by Mr. Lorry to Dr. Manette. He pretended that he needed some advice for a friend of his, but in fact he was discussing the doctor's case in order to help him understand his problem when he is out of his mind. Question 2. In her name, then let it be done. Who said this to whom? Dr. Manette said this to Mr. Lorry. Who is meant by in her name? Lucy, the daughter of Mr. Lorry's friend, or the daughter of Mr. Lorry's supposed friend, صديق Mr. Lorry's المزعوم. What were they speaking about? They were discussing what would happen if they took the tools of Mr. Lorry's disturbed friend. What's meant by let it be done? Let it be done means, okay, take away the tools for the sake of that friend's daughter. Well, will I be left to rot unjustly in the prison without being able to communicate with the outside world? Comment. Who said that? Charles Darnay said this to Citizen Defarge. He wondered if he wouldn't be given the right to contact his friends and tell them about his place. Defarge responded that he would be treated like those poor people had been treated before, in reference to Dr. Manette. They were put in prison for so long without trials or even accusations بدون محاكمة أو توجيه تهم لهم. What happens in Paris has its effect on London. Explain. That's right. When the revolution broke out in France, the noblemen escaped to London. Mr. Lorry had to go to Paris to protect the bank's documents during the revolution. Charles Darnay was forced to go back to France too in order to save his servant's life. That was Gabelle. Why was Mr. Lorry worried about Madame Defarge's attitude towards Lucy and her daughter? Because he felt that she had evil intentions, لها نوايا غير طيبة, towards Lucy and her child. Why on earth did you come back to France? Comment. These words were said by Monsieur Defarge to Charles Darnay while he was taking him to La Force. Monsieur Defarge was sad because he knew that Darnay was going to be killed, and this would affect the family of his ex-master, Dr. Manette. Who knows, many other people have been put in prison unjustly too. Comment. Monsieur Defarge said this to Darnay when he asked if he would be buried in La Force without trial? Monsieur Devarge reminded him of many people who were treated the same way before the revolution. He was referring to Dr. Manette, who had been buried in a worse prison for 18 years without a trial or even accusation. Don't call me Solomon. Do you want me to be killed? Who said this to whom? John Parsard, Mrs. Pross' brother, said this to Miss Pross. Why did the speaker refuse to be called Solomon? لماذا رفض أن يدعى بسولomon? Because he was disguised as a French citizen, كان متنكرا, and didn't want people to know that he carried an English name, أنه يحمل اسما إنجليزيا. Only that if it goes badly with Charles, I will be able to see him one last time. Comment. Sidney Carton said this to Mr. Lorry when the latter asked him about his plan with John Parsard to help Charles Darnley. Carton was planning to visit Charles in prison and put himself in his place. So now you can also be accused in Saint-Antoine of having links with another spy working for the English government. Comment. الآن أنت متهم في سانت أنطوان بأن لك ارتباط مع جاسوس يعمل مع الحكومة الإنجليزية. تعليقك. Sidney Carton said this to John Parsard when they uncovered his plan to help Roger Clive escape from England. عندما كشف خططه لتهريب روجر كلاي من إنجلترا. Sidney Carton was pushing hard on Parsard, كان بيضغط على Parsard to force him help in his plan to save Charles Darnley's life. كان بيضغط عليه لمساعدته في تنفيذ خطته لإنقاذ حياة تشارلز دارنلي. I write it now in the 10th year of my imprisonment. في العام العاشر لسجني. For there is no hope of my ever being freed, and I fear that I will soon lose my mind. Comment. Of course, these words were said by Dr. Manette and while he was in prison. This was written in the paper that Dr. Manette had written in prison to expose the crimes of Evermond, ليكشف جرائم Evermond family against a poor peasant family. He felt he would go mad, so he tried to write the paper hoping that someone might find it later. أحد ما قد يجد هذه الأوراق ويدافع عنه. Marquis, when the time comes that your crimes will be answered, or I call upon you and your brother, the last of your evil race, to answer for them. Who said this to whom? هذه الكلمات قيلت بواسطة الشاب الذي طعن من أخ إيفرموند لأنه كان بيدافع عن شرف أخته اللي هي أخت مدام ديفارج. The poor peasant young man said this to the Marquis twin brother. Who would pay for the Marquis crimes? من الذي سيدفع ثمن جرائم هذا الماركي؟ The last of the family's descendant, Charles Darnley, نسل Charles Evermond اللي هو Charles Darnley الابن. I had to unburden myself of the terrible secret. يجب أن أشيل عن نفسي هذا العبء لما رأيته من السر الفظيع الذي رأيته، الجريمة التي رأيها. Who said this? Dr. Manette. What was the terrible secret? ما هو السر الفظيع أو الشنيع الذي كان يحمله بداخله. It was how the Marquis and his twin brother destroyed a poor peasant family. كيف دمروا أسرة الفلاح الفقير. Why did that man do to unburden himself of the secret? He decided to write a letter to the minister telling him of the Evermont family's crime. قرر أن يكتب رسالة إلى الوزير عن جريمة الإيفرمونت family. For this I denounce them. لذلك أنا أتهمهم and their heirs وورثتهم to the last of their race إلى آخر نسلهم. Who said this about and about whom? Dr. Manet said this in his letter about the Marquis and his brother. What did the speaker mean by for this? لهذا. Their crimes against the poor peasant family. What did the speaker mean by them? The Marquis and his twin brother. The last. Who are the people included under the phrase the last of their race? آخر نسلهم Charles Darnay and his little daughter اللي هي بنت لوسي, little Lucy. That slain boy was my brother. That kidnapped girl dying of brain fever was my sister. Their heartbroken father was my father. I am the only surviving member of that family. Who said this to whom? Madame Defarge said this to the Jack 3. Who destroyed that poor family? The Marquis of Saint-Evremond and his twin brother. What did the speaker want to do in return? She wanted to destroy the last descendant of the family. تريد أن تدمر كل من ينتمي لنسل هذه الأسرة إيفرمونت، لأن البنت التي اغتصبت وقتل أخاها وقتل ومات أبوها حزنا كانت هي أخت مدام ديفارج، وهي اللي تبقت من هذه الأسرة المنكوبة بسبب الإيفرمونت. The duty to avenge the crimes of the Evermont, every last one falls upon me. Comment. Who said this? Madame Defarge. Why did the speaker want to avenge? لماذا يريد أن ينتقم? She wanted to avenge because the Evermont family destroyed her family, killed her sister, her brother, her father died broken-hearted, and she was the only member left of the family. Just before 3 that afternoon, a carriage going out of Paris stopped at the city gates. What was going to happen at 3 that afternoon? Sidney Carton was going to be executed, سيعدم, by the by the guillotine instead of Charles Darnay. Who were in that carriage? Dr. Manette, Mr. Lorry, Lucy, her child, and her husband. Why did the carriage stop at the city gate? The guard wanted to check their traveling papers. What did Defarge find in the room 105 North Tower? ماذا وجد في الزنزانة? He had found a paper written by Dr. Manette denouncing Udine, the Evermont family, to the last of their race. I am here alone because while my husband is a good Republican and a brave man, he feels sorry for the doctor. Comment. Madame Defarge said this to Jacques 2 and 3 when she met them at the woodcutter's hat, she didn't trust her husband with her plans. كانت لا تثق في زوجها في تنفيذ خططها الشيطانية لقتل مزيد لوسي وابنتها, because she knew he loved the doctor and his family. Why didn't Sidney Carton regret his sacrifice? لماذا سيدني كارتون لم يندم على تضحيته بحياته لإنقاذ تشارلز دارني؟ Sidney Carton didn't at all regret his sacrifice. He felt that Lucy and the other people he had saved would hold a special place for him in their hearts. He believed that his sacrifice was the best thing he had ever done in his miserable life. كان بيعتبر أن تضحيته هي أفضل شيء عمله في حياته البائسة من قبل. I know of your evil plans, but you won't succeed. أنا أعرف خططك الشيطانية لكنك لن تنجحي. Who said this to whom? Miss Pross said this to Madame Defarge. What were the evil plans? She wanted to kill Lucy and her child. Did the evil plans succeed? Why? No, because Miss Pross killed Madame Defarge. I see, my dear friends, for whom I am giving my life, living peaceful, useful, happy lives. Comment. Who said this? Sidney Carton felt happy before his execution. شعر بالسعادة قبل تنفيذ حكم الإعدام فيه بدلا من تشارلز دارني. He felt that he could do something useful in his useless life. He felt that his sacrifice would bring happiness to Lucy and her family forever. I really cannot let the doctor go free, even for my husband's sake. The guillotine needs more heads. Comment. Who said this? Madame Defarge said this to the Jacks 2 and 3. She was blinded by revenge. أعماها الرغبة في الانتقام. And she even wanted to kill Dr. Manette, who was imprisoned because he had tried to help her family. حتى دكتور مانيت اللي هو دخل السجن بسبب دفاعه عن أسرتها كانت أيضا تريد أن يتضمن انتقامها لأسرة إيفرموند لأنه زوج بنته لإيفرموند. Extra questions from previous exams. دي أسئلة إضافية أعزائي الطلاب من اختبارات سابقة أرجو أن تركزوا عليها. Comment on the following questions. You didn't use the name Solomon Pross when you were in England. I recognize you now. Who said this? To whom? Jerry Cruncher said this to Solomon. What name did the other person carry in England? He carried the name John Parsert. Why did he carry another name in Paris? Because he was disguised as a French citizen. لأنه كان متنكر كمواطن فرنسي. For I fear if I do not, one day Charles may have to pay for his father's crimes. Who said this? The wife of the Marquis, Charles' mother, welded Charles Darnley, said this to Dr. Manette when she came to try to help the little girl who remained from the poor family اللي هي كانت كبرت وبقت مدام ديفارش later. She was afraid that Charles would pay for his father's crime one day. كانت تخشى أن تشارلز قد يدفع ثمن جرائم أبوه وعمه في يوم من الأيام وهو ما تنبأت به وحدث بالفعل في أحداث القصة لاحقا. I see, my dear friends, for whom I am giving my life, living peaceful, useful, happy lives. أعتقد مر علينا السؤال ده من قبل. Sidney Carton said this before he was killed by the guillotine. He felt that this is the first time he did something useful in his life. He felt that his sacrifice would bring happiness to Lucy and her family forever. For his sake and the sake of his daughter, I beg your help. Comment. Mr. Lorry said this to Dr. Manette. He pretended he needed some advice for a friend of his. In fact, he was discussing the doctor's case in order to help him understand his problem when he is out of his mind. أيضا مر علينا هذا السؤال من قبل. What was the doctor's special power in Paris? قد يتغير السؤال بصيغة أخرى لكن قد تكون الإجابة واحدة. Dr. Manet's special power in Paris was that he was an old Bastille prisoner or ex-Bastille prisoner. Every patriot in Paris tried to help him. This privilege, هذه الميزة, helped him to know the news of his son-in-law. زوج ابنته. What was written in the paper that Monsieur Devarge found in 105 North Tower? Monsieur Devarge, or Mr. Devarge, was curious to see the secret cell 105 North Tower where Dr. Manet was locked up for 18 years. Dr. Manet registered what happened to him, سجل ما حدث له, and how he was sent to prison by the Evermont without trial, بدون محاكمة. Who knows, many other people have been put in prison unjustly too. أيضا السؤال ده مر علينا من قبل. Monsieur Rivard said this to Darnay when he asked him if he would be buried in La Force without trial. Monsieur Rivard reminded him of the many people who were treated the same way before the revolution in reference to Dr. Manet. My crime is said to be treason against the people, treason because I have served you. Of course, these words were said by Gabelle, Mr. Charles Darnay's servant. Gabelle said this in his letter to Charles Darnay. He was put in prison because he was accused of treason, تهم بالخيانة, for serving the Evermont family. Gabelle begged Charles to come to Paris and help him. Death by the guillotine in 24 hours. Comment. This was said by the president of the court after reading Dr. Manet's letter and taking the opinion of the jury. He sentenced Charles Darnay to be killed by the guillotine in 24 hours. His heart is bleeding and we must be kind to him. He is capable of gentle things, good things, even great things. Of course, these words were said by Lucy to her husband. Lucy said this to her husband. She was asking him to show more kindness or more consideration to Mr. Sidney Carton, reminding him that he was weak in his misery and they were strong in their happiness together. Why on earth did you come back to France? I think we had seen that questions before. These words were said by Monsieur Devarge to Charles Darnay while he was taking him to La Force. Monsieur Devarge was sad because he knew that Darnay was going to be killed and this would affect the family of his ex-master, Dr. Manet. He wished that Darnay had never come to France at that time. Marky, when the time comes that your crimes will be answered for, I call upon you and your brother, the last of your race, to answer for them. Who said this to whom? The poor peasant young man said this to the Marquis twin brother. Who would pay for the Marquis crimes? The last of the family descendant, Charles Darnay. If I left it up to you, you would try to save the prisoner even now. Comment. Madame Defarge said this to her husband, who was trying to convince her that sending Charles to the guillotine was enough for revenge. يعني يكفي إرسال تشارلز دارني للانتقام. That's enough. She refused this. She wanted more blood and more revenge. She accused him that he had a soft heart, له قلب رقيق, and he might even think of saving Charles Darnley's life. وقد يفكر في إنقاذ حياة Charles Darnley himself. Give an example from the novel to show how noble Sydney Carton was. يعني هات مثال من القصة يبين كيف سيدني كارتون كان شخص نبيل. He sacrificed his life for the sake of his beloved Lucy so as not to feel sad for someone who is dear to her. He was going to be executed by the guillotine instead of Charles Darnley. Sir, we have done wrong and we are reaping the fruits of our wrong. نحن نجني ثمار أخطائنا. Comment. Of course, these words were said by Charles Darnley to his uncle. This said by Charles Darnley to his uncle, Saint Evremond, when he went to talk to him to correct his mistakes against the peasants, but the Evremond threatened him that he would send him to prison. How was Dr. Manet's imprisonment a source of help for Darnley during his difficulty? Dr. Manet used his power as an ex-Bastille prisoner to help Darnley to set him free from La Force prison. Sydney Carton would never be a lion, but he was an amazingly good jackal. Explain. Carton used to help others, but he never helped himself. For example, he helped Stryver to solve very difficult cases and achieve success, but he never tried to help himself to be successful in his life. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being with me. I hope that you have get some benefit from that video. I want you to watch it carefully and try to watch and see the questions. I will try to put the file for that questions after watching that video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being with me. Don't forget to share the video with your friends and don't forget to put like and subscribe to my channel English for You with Mr. Mahmoud Helmi. Thank you and goodbye.